afternoon all. So yeah, thank you Janardhan for that introduction. So I'm from Salesforce. How many of you know Salesforce? Okay, that's a good number. Okay, I'm a senior developer evangelist working at Salesforce, and my role is to motivate the developers to use the platform. And you can reach me on Twitter using my Twitter handle at Satya SFDC. You can take a note of it. If you have any questions on lighting web components, you can definitely do a DM, direct message to me, so that I'll try to answer your questions. So in today's world, what developers want? So they want more standards, and they want some common development model or common component model using which they can build their web applications. And it should be easier to find. If they want to find some solutions, it should be easier to find, right? What developers don't want is building your, breaking of your build, right? You have built it and you have put it on production, it breaks, it doesn't work. We definitely don't like that. And we don't like stuck in some technology. So we wanted to work on the latest technology possible to make our applications more and more moderate and futuristic. So if we go back to history, this is 2014 web stack. You can see two compartments here. One is the orange compartment, the other one is the green compartment. So orange compartment is all about web standards. So if you go back to 2014, when most of the JavaScript frameworks evolved, so there was almost a proliferation of JavaScript frameworks where frameworks were competing with each other to implement the features, right? So whatever you're seeing in the green color, so those are the features that ought to be implemented by each of those JavaScript frameworks. But between 2014 and 2019, most of the web standards evolved with the TC39 and W3C involvement. Salesforce as an organization is a sitting member in both of these committees where they take decision about standardization of the web. So if you see here, so with this W3C and TC39 specifications are in place, now the view is completely changed. If you see 2019 web stack, so here you can see all the things which were in green color there, most of the things have become standards now. Now the JavaScript frameworks only need to implement that thin layer, that secret sauce, whatever has to be implemented, only those three parts are to be implemented by JavaScript framework. And Salesforce is one such company which has put a forward step and started implementing the JavaScript framework based on these web standards. So if you want to understand what are web components is one of the concepts, one of the specifications from your HTML5 where you can create the custom elements. So when you are creating the components, lighting web components, there we are actually creating the custom elements. So for those who don't know what are custom elements, if you see the HTML, what are elements we are using there, these are the standard elements, the head, body, title, whatever, right? Now you can create your component itself as a custom element and you can use it in the HTML pages. But how? It's based on 4 specifications. One is the custom elements, which is part of HTML5, as I said, using which you can design your elements. And the second is the shadow DOM, where you can create an encapsulation for your component so that your component can function independently, right? And this component can be used by other components as well. And the third thing is ES modules. So this is ECMAScript standard with which you can modularize your JavaScript code, and then you can use your JavaScript code by importing it in another JavaScript code. So basically when we create the components here using lighting web components, you can create 2 types of components. One is user interface components, where you want to create the custom elements and show it in the user interface. You can also create utility components, where you can provide the JavaScript functionality as a ECMAScript module. And then that functionality can be imported into any of your other JavaScript files and start using it. And the fourth important part is HTML template, where you write the markup. Now, whenever you want to create a web component, you are going to use all or few of these 4 concepts. So you will be creating a custom element, you'll be using the shadow DOM there, you'll be using the ES modules, and then you can use the HTML template to create a custom element which can be embedded in your HTML page. Now, So with these web components, you get major benefits like you can use, it is highly interoperable. You can create a component and then you can use that component somewhere else in another HTML page or in another JavaScript file, okay? But what is Lightning Web Component? It's a layer of JavaScript that is built above these web components. In the earlier slide, I showed the difference between 2014 web stack and 2019 web stack. If you remember 2019 web stack, there were a lot of standards over which there was a thin layer of JavaScript framework, right? So this is what we have done. So we have used the standards there and we have built a thin layer of framework over those standards, with which you get the benefits of like developer productivity, where you can build the components in a faster pace because you have all the required tools and features to build any kind of custom element there. And then you'll also get the performance and you have security in place and you also have a design system where you can do a better styling. So Salesforce as a company, it has been using this Lightning Web Component Framework for the past 2.5 years, if I'm not wrong, and it is exposed to the external world only 8 months back. So if you see this stack, this is the Salesforce stack, where we have all these standard components. We are using all the standard functionality there. And then we have built some Salesforce bindings above it where we can access the data from the Salesforce orgs. And then we also built some components using all these things as called as base Lightning components, which can be directly used, like any user interface elements, maybe a drop-down box or whatsoever, which corresponds to the Salesforce user interface. And then we have started using the Lightning Web Components framework. So this we have been using for our own purpose, for our platform, for our product, but then we expose it to the outside world because it's a common JavaScript framework which can be used by any of the JavaScript developers. So we open sourced it 4 months back, and then it can be used with any kind of JavaScript frameworks, whether it is your AWS or any kind of framework there. So what are the benefits? When we use that, we can build the applications on the Salesforce platform. So Lightning platform is the Salesforce platform on which you can build the applications, and you can also build the applications of the platform. You can build applications on some other frameworks using the Lightning Web Component framework. And then because you have open sourced it, you can use the code. You can see how the code runs internally, and you can also contribute. So if you have some suggestions about the code, you can contribute, you can generate a pull request. We'll go through the pull request and probably we'll also take it into the Lightning Web Component framework. So you can reach this site called lwc.dev, where you get the complete documentation about the LWC framework. So if you see that, you can build the component in one single Lightning Web Component framework, and then you can use any of the other open source frameworks for building, testing, quality, deployment, and all. Okay, you can use Just for testing or Jasmine for testing, or you can use Heroku container where you can deploy your JavaScript components and start using it. Okay, and for Salesforce, this is not the new thing. This is not the first time we are making anything open source. If you see, we have a journey of open source products. So we have created so many products. We have Apache Phoenix, Argus, DeckaNLP, Oakleaf. That is the command line interface. You can write the plugins there. And then the latest one is the Lightning Web Components. With that said, I'll not talk too much. Rather, we'll see some demo about it. So if you see here, this is, let me switch on. Okay, so here is the URL where you can find all the open source products of Salesforce. You have a set of products here. So we have Lightning Web Components, Transmograph AI, so on and so forth, where Salesforce has directly created some of these open source products, and in some products, Salesforce has its contribution. So Salesforce also contributed in some of the products there. So let's go to this Lightning Web Components. So this is the guide I was talking about. You can quickly create a Lightning Web Component framework and start using it. So if you want to learn more about it, you can click on Get Started, and you can go through these various steps in the guide. you have installation, and these are the 3 simple steps with which you can install your lighting web component framework to test. So we have created a small tool for you with which you'll be able to create some boilerplate code from where you can start building the lighting web components. And not only that, so you can, we have also created a playground where you can, like while you are referring to the document, you can also see, dynamically change the code there and see the output, and you can learn how it works. So these are the different supported browsers there. And we also created a sample application for you called Recipes app, where you can find a lot of examples where you can see the code snippets. You can copy those code snippets and start using in your projects. So if you go here, so this is the GitHub repository where you can find these components code, and you also can find the steps on how to install it and run it. So I already checked out the code from here, and I've installed it one of my folders, local folders, and you can see how it works. So when you create, when you use these 3 commands, which I was talking about in our previous slide. So when you create this, it creates a simple application structure for you. It will ask some questions like, what should be the app name, what should be the package name, where you want to store the code, so on and so forth. And then it creates a structure for you where you can start creating the components. In this case, I created a component, and these lighting web components are based on simple web standards where you are going to use a HTML file, where I was talking about template, right? HTML file where you can create a custom element using the template tag. So here you can write your markup, and here you can write your JavaScript file. So if you see here, I'm importing lightning element from LWC framework, and I can start using it. So here I defined a basic property called greetings, right, which has an array of information, and then I'm just accessing this property from my HTML file by using a very simple syntax where your property is enclosed by braces. So let's see it in action. So I can run it. When you install that package, you get a set of commands which you can use to start the server locally. So for instance, I want to start the server and see how it works. So I can use simple command like npm run watch. Okay, I'm running server in a different system. So let us run the server here, npm run watch. So it starts up a server for you, and you can go there and you can see your component working. Let me make a change to the component. So I can make a change to the component here in my greetings.js. I can change the property to hello. From hello, I can say Bengaluru. And let me save it. And you can see my component showing hello Bengaluru. There are a number of, so it is shown in different languages. Wait, probably you'll see hello Bengaluru as well. So this is a bit complex example, but yeah. So it's a simple property binding. You can create a property in your JavaScript file, and then you can access the property from your HTML template just by using the braces. You can see hello Bengaluru there. So let me show some other components as I was talking about the LWC recipes there. So if you see this recipes app, so you can, if you want to learn more about it, you can go and install the recipes app, and then so I have recipes app already checked out on my local system. So I can go and stop my server here. Let us start a recipes app. So we have created a very good application for you where you can directly see how it works. So this is the recipes app where we have different tabs. So you can start with hello program. Let's see how the hello code looks like. So I have created a hello.html file. We simply had a greeting here. And if I open hello.js file, this is where you can see I have defined world. So I just defined a property called greeting and I've initialized it to world. And in hello.html, I'm accessing it and I'm showing it. So this is the simple output there. So which shows hello world. I want to see some other example here. So where I want to do check some reactive property, and I make changes in my input, like instead of saying hello world, I say hello Bengaluru here. And it changes. So this is the output. This is one component which is embedded in my HTML page. If you go there, and let me open that hello binding example for you. So here I'm using the same greeting property, but this time I'm accepting the value from a input box. So I'm accepting the value in a property here, greeting, that will be set there. Whenever it is changed, I'll call the handle change method. So I've simply written handle change method where I am setting the greeting property to the event target value. So once that is set, so because here you can see the property is decorated with something called as decorator. So these are the special things which are introduced in your decorators, though it is a common concept. In your Lighting web components, it is introduced to make your property as reactive. By default, as you know, the JavaScript properties are private. I'm making this property as reactive. When I make it reactive, whenever this value changes, the value is communicated back to your user interface, and you can access that value here. Right? These are pretty simple examples, but you can create as complex examples as you want. You can see how the components can be composed. A parent component can have a child component. You can also communicate between the components. A child component can communicate with the parent component. And there are examples where you can also communicate from parent component to child component. This is one more example you can see where I can change this to say 60%. So this is the parent component where I have percentage. I'm changing the value to 60%, and I can see the child component is automatically getting updated there. So how does it work? Let me open this component here. So this is the parent component where I'm setting the percentage property, and you can see I'm using the child component called chart bar. This is like any other HTML element, though it's a custom element which belongs to a namespace called recipes. If you see here, I have a recipe namespace within which I have a chart bar component in which I just created HTML file, JavaScript file, and any necessary CSS there. So in this case, the parent component is setting the percentage property, whichever is input in your parent component. It is setting the parent property to the attribute of your element here. And if you see the chart bar as a child component, and in chart bar I have declared that property as a public property. Again, here I am using one more decorator called @API, which makes that property as a public property and a reactive property. So whenever parent component changes that value and sends it, it is communicated to the child using the events, basic events, and it's basically public API, and it can start reflecting the changes here. That's how you can see the change. Similarly, a child component can communicate with the parent component using the HTML concept called custom events. So HTML has standard events like on click, on change, and all. So here you can use the custom events. You can create your own event and send a communication to the parent component as well. So these are the different examples, and so I will leave the URL to you. You can go and further explore those examples from that URL. And if you want to start learning, you want to start working on Lighting web components in 1 hour, so this is the place where you can go. You can go to sforce.co/learnlwc. where you have some training tutorials, well-organized training tutorials, where you can learn in a fun way. Salesforce has a fun way of teaching people, where we have a product called Trailhead, where you can start learning, which covers like many aspects, not just Salesforce platform, not just Lightning Web Components, but your communication skills or operational skills or your organization skills. There are tutorials for each of these things, which you can learn using your Trailhead modules, where we have some chapters there. And then, sorry. Yeah. And then you can scan these codes. The first one is lwc.dev, where you can find the complete documentation. And the second one is where you can go there and start with the 1 hour tutorial. If you want to work for 2 hours, then we have a trail of tutorials where we have three different projects that you can implement. And then if you want to learn more, then there is a tutorial for you as well, where you can deep dive and start learning Lightning Web Components. And it's pretty easy to use and pretty easy to learn. So if you see this, you can understand, you can start working on Lightning Web Components, you can create a productive component just in an hour. With that, if you have any questions, I can take the questions. Okay, if you have worked on Stencil, Stencil is also similar to the LWC framework. As I said, Salesforce has its own user interface. If you go back to 2006, we have created, when the JavaScript frameworks were not in place, we have our own framework called Visual Force, a own language called Visual Force, with which you can create the user interface. Then in 2014, with the evolution of JavaScript frameworks, we have created our own framework called Aura and started creating components with that. But with the invent of the latest web components, now we have created Lightning Web Components framework with which you can develop. And I'm pretty sure even other JavaScript frameworks, they will be inclined towards the web standards and they start changing their frameworks as well. Yeah, so basically, so that's where you can use it has a concept called Shadow DOM, right? Wherein every component has its own encapsulation. And when you say state management, you can do a communication between the parent component and the child component. And it has to be not directly compared with other virtual DOM kind of stuff.